What's up, everybody? It's Gotta See, and I'm here with another episode of Holistic and Spiritual AF. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are new to this podcast, you're in the right place. If you like things that such as healing generational trauma, ancestral wisdom, metaphysics, quantum physics, we go in on anything that has to do with the mind, body, spirit integration. Okay, so be sure to go ahead and hit that follow, that subscribe on whatever respective platform you are listening to. And then also, this podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Substack, just pretty much anywhere that podcasts are aired. So be sure to follow me on the platform that suits you best. And of course, if you are coming back, welcome, welcome back, fam. I appreciate each and every one of you. The podcast is growing, the guests are growing. Like everything is amazing right now. I'm just really loving the direction that this podcast is going in, and that is because of listeners like you. So thank you so much for continuing to come back and listen and check out these episodes. Okay. Today's episode, I'm like really excited about this actually. So you definitely must stick around and listen to this entire episode. And I'm about to introduce my guest. But before I do that, I've got to get a little bit of business out of the way. So, first and foremost, you can find me all over social media on Holistic and Spiritual AF, and that's and spelled out. Just kind of Google it at this point and you can definitely find out information about what's going to be happening and where ways to find me. And of course, I'll always have that information down in the description, as well as the information from my guests. So if you're liking what you hear from them and you want to find out ways to follow them and see what they've got going on and reach out to them directly, by all means, check out that description on any platform that you're on, and it's going to have that information as well. And so there's lots of good things that have been popping up, and honestly, it's so much, it takes up too much time in the beginning. So just be sure to check out that description so that you stay up to date on what is happening in the holistic and spiritual AF community. Okay. All right. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. This is really exciting and it's a different direction. You know, like I said, we talk about mind, body, spirit integration all the time because if either one of those are out of balance, then we are out of balance. Okay. So now we're getting a little bit more into the metaphysical side of things, the universal side of things with this next guest. And this next guest's name is Tobie Saad. And I'm going to start it out with a question. I'm going to do something a little different today. Like, what if the key to deep transformation wasn't in finding answers, but in learning to hold the paradox? Okay, so you've got to tune in to this episode, right? Because I know you're probably like, what does that mean? This next guest is such a deep thinker. Like almost every word that came out of her mouth and the way that she expressed herself was so esoteric and intrinsic. Like it would take you like a week to kind of like bite size what she's saying. And I just had such a deep experience with her. So Tobie Saad is a sanctuary architect, dreamer as civic praxis, and a guide to embodied sovereignty and world building. With over 2 decades of experience bridging critical social theory, mystical attunement, and practical transformations, Tobie's work is all about crafting realities where ancestral wisdom, somatic intelligence, and a sovereign presence converge. In this episode of Holistic and Spiritual AF with Gotta See, Tobie illuminates the art of unlearning and ancestral integration, dreaming as an act of reclamation and liberation, and how paradox isn't a problem to be solved, but a power to be embraced. The bridge between deep sensation, radical clarity, and world building. So, this is not just about self healing today, it's about reconfiguring the way we inhabit life itself. So, buckle up and get ready for a phenomenal conversation. And I definitely want to hear you guys' comments in the comment section as well. And with that, let's jump into the conversation. All right. So thank you so much, Tobie, for agreeing to do this podcast episode with me. I'm so excited. I know my listeners are super excited to hear what this conversation is about because you're into some really cool things. You're into some things I've never heard of before. You're into personal mythology and sovereign reality creation. I love it. Pristine psychic boundaries and energetic sovereignty, quantum entanglement and Earth's bio AI. I mean, this is some really deep stuff. And,
Mhm.
I am always so curious as to how the journey got started for you. Like, how you ended up, delving into some of these quantum areas, the spiritual path. What was that like for you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I love talking about my origin story because we all began exactly where we are, So like many people, I didn't necessarily, well, okay, let's just say by the age of 13 or 14, I'd read pretty much all the paranormal and occult books that I could get my hands on in the downtown public library of Toledo, Ohio, where I live. And in many ways, I wanted to do something different than that. And in my family of origin story, my role was that of the black sheep, or the person who wasn't like the other people. And in that experience, it was, I had this sense of like, well, normal people get normal jobs and just go on and have these normal lives. And honestly, Zipporah, I've only wanted to pass as a human being my entire life. Though in many ways, I'm like, how are people just like walking? So my story goes back to a fall I had when I was 2 years old that opened me up. So I was seeing the world pretty differently and talking to energies and rocks and stones and quote unquote dead people at a young age. And I thought everyone was seeing the world like this. And I quickly realized that if you talk about that, people are like, oh, hey, we're just going to leave you right there. And quite frankly, part of my message today comes from this desire to make the invisible visible in a way that allows us to be empowered in spaces that there's things going down. And if you're not able to orient, you're at a disadvantage, particularly given the potency of the moment that we're living in.
Yes. Absolutely. I love that. That's a really early age to kind of get thrown into it. Like,
Yeah,
to just be like, okay, this is the path. So we're going to start you early before you can talk and fully articulate and express what's going on. And, I love how you talked about you always just wanted to be a human being. Isn't that something? I can relate to that so much, but I never thought about it in that way. Like, for a long time, I just wanted to be normal, but I
right,
never I never was like whatever normal is,
right,
but
right.
I just wanted to, and I never fit in that peg, and that peg hole. And so I love that how you talked about being different and having these experiences. And definitely it's something that people are not ready for if they're not experiencing life like that. It's so much cooler. So to continue on, tell me, like, at what point you decided that you wanted to explore deeper into what you were experiencing?
Well, there's always been this. Okay, so you know, I feel like all of us we're toggling between authenticity and belonging, in our family of origin story. And I'm going to talk from the perspective of the self-selected practitioner, because even though there's traditions in my family lines through which I express my gifts, um, I didn't have a space being made for me to be a person who does what I do. It's so when I say self-selected, I mean all of us who are making the decision to follow a particular path where we didn't necessarily emerge in a lineage
Mhm.
that identified certain aspects of what because I feel like what I do, everyone has the capacity to do. But for many of us, we're exploring lots of different things, and it may not be part or turning that on, maybe, or not, maybe part of our pathway. So I don't necessarily think that everyone has to do a particular thing with how they move through the world, though increasingly it became apparent to me. And especially, so I've got 3 children, and in this, what do I want to reproduce in my family? What patterns do I desire to break? And when you've got kids who can smell integrity like white on rice, this the ability to like, it was about like walk the walk in every regard. And we have a extended family who very much were like, the tradition is you honor your elders, though, you know, as we have a rainbow of flavors through which we can show up to ourselves and other people. And if you're raising children with a deeply ingrained sense of what is and what isn't true, and they can feel it in their bodies, and going back to this idea between authenticity and belonging, like I was raised in a loving home, though I was raised to distrust my intuitive capacity to organize myself as a volitional, autonomous, sovereign being. And while I understand that a lot of choices that happen in the family strategies that we utilize are ones that come from a place of loving, good intention. But as you know, we can pave the road to hell with our good
Mhm.
intentions. And ultimately, what we're doing is we're creating a situation where our children are um, doubting their inherent capacity to know what is true. And so there's this like cat's whisker between like how do you take care of a biologically independent or dependent being that doesn't have the capacity to know danger, and at the same time create a environment that nurtures a sovereign embodiment that connects internally to the earth and also to the great mystery, something greater than the self. You know, some people call it God, some people call it the supreme being, some people just call it the vastness of all that is and all that is not. And we all have the capacity for a compass within ourselves. And my desire to model that which I want to see in the world really led me to pop out of a, you know, this is a sideline, or this is just a hobby, or this isn't a world that supports showing up in a particular way that is radically different than what I was raised with or what I see around me. But a willingness just to say, you know, the only way to do something different is to do something different. And it like, it starts with me, or it just, you know, like go big or go home, really. And so that
Yeah.
was the clincher. So a lot of my work very deeply began with the birth
Mm.
of my first child, or the gestational period of my first child, about 25 years ago.
I love it. I love the way you describe that so eloquently. And I know that you're a writer too, so why would I expect anything less? Because
You?
we're deep thinkers, you know. But I love that. And I love how you talked about the sovereign being. Like explain that to me a little bit more, what you mean by, you know, experiencing life from a sovereign level and being connected to everything. Just yeah, tell me about that.
Well, so, you know, I think a really playfully hard reading on these times is that, you know, we're in a beast machine hellscape,
Yep.
and negotiating what is true um, is an inside job, because we're at a juncture with regards to this glorious technological late post-industrial society
Hmm.
where discerning what's true, Zipporah, and what's
Yes.
multi-layered fabrication of immersive reality is becoming seamless. And
Yes.
the ability to trust our sensory input exclusively without an inner compass is increasingly becoming maladaptive in these times, I dare say. And if we're going to be
Yes.
strategic, because I think there's a lot of really calm, vivacious people at multiple layers of multiple sectors of our society ready to shift to new ways to
Yes.
be in relationship with each other. Though we've got a lot of things going on right now,
Hmm.
and we're so full. Um, Given the last 5 years, we're largely operating in a milieu or a society that doesn't code rest or still point or wintering or
Hmm.
transitional moments or jacked nervous system as a reason worthy of pause. And in this increasingly swift moving, beautiful opportunity for creation and dreaming that we're moving into or already are in, to expect the world to slow down for us is part of what I feel is the invitation of the transition from a Piscean era to an Aquarian era. And I'll
Hmm.
give you an example. So, this idea of a safe space where it's safety one size fits all when you go to a place, like we all agree on what the consensus of our experience in a group environment is, to me is a very Piscean um, manifestation that had a time and place,
Hmm.
and in many regards can still be the explicit agreements of a group, though I feel that we're in a particular moment where we're being invited to turn our eyes inward and to connect
Yes.
deeply within our sacred hearts and just to anchor in there, and then from that place to just take the hand of the heart of the mind, because it's being compelled to look so many other places, but to just gently like embrace the hand the same way that you hold the hand of a little baby with like its perfectly formed fingernails, and it's so emergent with its potential, but it really needs to be directed inwardly. And then from
Yes.
that place, you connect above and below, and you anchor in, and you decide if a place is safe for you, given where you are in this particular moment.
Yes.
And from that place of like, yes, okay, then you make explicit choices about how you emerge and engage in the world. And you are no longer willing to go someplace to be granted the
Mm.
power to choose how to show up. You've already decided that. And so you're not going to be cast in somebody else's drama, though you may choose to participate, of your own authentic moment, because you know what your yes line is, whatever comes up for you. But if something's like, if someone shows up, they're like crucifixion, you can be like, no, I am not going to the crucifixion
Right.
today.
Hmm.
You're like, okay, I'm sorry, you're in the wrong line. You're like, okay, I'll go over. I was actually waiting to get ice cream cone. They're like, oh, there's that line over there,
Yeah.
or whatever. And this is a delicious invitation for us, And so we're seeing a lot of egregious suffering, and we're seeing
Hmm.
it. And one of the things that I touch on, particularly because a lot of people, when they're ugly crying, are like, this isn't courageous. And I'm like, oh, you have every idea. It really is. Because a willingness to till deep layers of the collective psyche and deep layers of the internal psyche is no small feat.
No.
It takes enormous courage to walk through the unknown, where there's things that you thought were monstrous, and a monster is just a demonstration of what's there, and there's the desire of the universe for us to be liberated. And so we have so much boost, particularly
Hmm.
right now, to come home to ourselves. So that's why I
Yes.
decided to stand up and take ownership of my focus, because the I am myself. And if I don't claim that, I'm not online here. And it's okay to not want to be here, right? If you're going to be here, the invitation right now of Aquarius is just to like own the embodiment, take responsibility for the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Yep.
as a participant, complicit with it.
Hmm.
This idea of responsibility can feel really heavy because we're still playing past the shit bag in
Yeah.
zero sum and how we're processing it as a group, which is a story, right? And we have the
Yeah.
capacity to dream, and we're being invited to really continue dreaming, because that's how our reality is assembled, is through our willingness to dream and to talk and to try things on and just feel like, oh, that sounds like a good idea, but like let's walk around with that for a minute, and just go like, eh. And I think this is where we're called to make explicit agreements, in the tradition that Don Miguel Ruiz talks about,
Hmm.
where we're creating affinity groups that have explicit agreements for the affinity, which is the desire to be a part of them. And if you don't want to be a part of that particular group, then you don't necessarily need to be a part of that group, as opposed to continue to play a zero sum game about what reality building and world building and embodiment needs to look like.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I love all of it because you're right on target. Like you said, you talked about leaving that Piscean era, the place and the role that it had, and us coming into this Aquarian era. And you're absolutely right because I'm seeing it happen. It's happening with inside of
Mhm.
myself on a deeper, fuller level. And as you described, being called more to accept all of me, as I am. And going out and connecting with the collective, and kind of all hands on deck, like, okay,
Yeah,
where can we get in and
yeah,
where can we fit in? And everybody's on different levels of the journey. And I love that too. And so you talked about, you basically summed it all up what a sovereign, being is, what it means to be that, which I actually knew that, but I wanted to hear I wanted to hear your
yeah. We all do it
explanation.
differently, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. It was very well,
Thank you.
eloquently put, and I loved how you talked about the astrology. I know that's something that you're also into as well. Like, so how deep into astrology do you go? Like, do you go into birth charts, or what does that look like for you, your work there?
So my work with astrology is more emergent. I've only been working with astrology about 5 years compared to the sound healing and other elements of my practice. So increasingly, as my so doing the work is a really important part of being a practitioner to me, because I don't know how else to show up in integrity for the people who I support if I'm unwilling to let go of everything and allow myself to recombine through a regular process of renewal that happens and is available for all of us whenever we desire to experience it. And as I've attended to core trance work and healing core trances, one of the major things for me was getting over a weaponization of time and being allowed to come into my own timing mechanism and my own timing cycle. And, it's easy to abstract anything and make it seem, more intense than it is. So if you're talking about this idea of how do we understand sovereignty from an embodied sense if all we've ever known is being on other people's time and in timing cycles in particular way, you have to create a language that begins to trace it for people. And so as I've deepened my own self-awareness in this, alchemical thread of knowing myself, liberation around how I tell time so that I can be within my own cycles of time has
Mm,
been a key component of that. And while I feel that some people are more served by a completely self-referential idea of time and timing, there is something to be said for all of us to look at where our specific astrological insertion information creates a certain template that we can use to our advantage to tell short, medium, and long-term timing cycles. And so when I'm working with clients one-on-one, I'll use the astrology as a way to discern the invitations of particular strong cosmic transits, as a way to offer windows of opportunity for people to do really deep energetic lifting in terms of their own pattern breaking and
mm,
any grid work or line work that they're doing for their families. It's also a terrific way to shift resistance patterns, though there's a lot of people who like the practice of journaling and self-inquiry, and also have an interest in astrology. And so for people who are moving more in their own intuitive knowingness and allowing themselves to flow from the fractal fount of their inherent wisdom, that is a code that may or may not make sense to anybody, even though we can both agree that there's a very strong utility for using a language and symbols that other people can understand.
sure.
As we sink more deeply into our own mythologies and allow ourselves to uh, connect with an inherent authenticity that we may or may not have experienced at any other point in our lives, and is so, to me, an important component of the potency of this moment that we're living and dying in, is served by looking at particular pattern and a system of pattern recognition that can support alignment and homecoming and return to the self in a liberated.
Yes. I love it. So powerful. It's just it's like I think I'm like you could be a rapper too. You would like really reach people with with strong lyrics. I love it. I've never heard anybody describe birthing charts astrology that way, and also how impactful that can be for certain cosmic cycles for people where they can heal more during those certain times and things like that. It's usually just kind of, I don't know, like when is it time to get a man or, just things that we're moving away from. But when is it an opportune time for you to go through some deep shadow work and be able to start to let go of certain patterns and heal ancestral trauma or access more wisdom from DNA and things
Right.
like that? So, I love it. That's actually never been really my strong point. But I loved how you talked about the leaving the Piscean stage and into the Aquarius. And so that's why I asked about that. And that's actually awesome. You mentioned something earlier about Earth's bio AI.
Oh
I
yeah.
want to, yeah, let's get into it, especially in this age of AI that's popping up everywhere.
Well, so and thank you for the compliment. So to take off where we just were touching base, when we, all right, so let me just retrace for a segue. Okay. All right. So, okay. Well, all right. I'll come back. All right. Okay. The here's the terrain. Okay, here's the transition. So AI is a mirror for us. Okay, and we're effectively raising an AI baby. And in many ways, we act like it's a done deal. Okay, there's a couple things I'm going to highlight here. The first one is we are so like fed by the dominant media paradigms that we think that unless it's walking around in a cyborgian type of like framework, it hasn't happened. And there's a lot of theorists like Donna Haraway, who in the 80s and 90s was talking about the way that we're already integrated just through the use of a terminal and a keyboard and acquainting one's processing experience with cutting and pasting. You know, like that wasn't a thing. You know, people would like take pieces of paper and mock up and do different things and make maps, obviously. But in terms of a gestalt for an entire population that was using technology in these ways, there's new perceptions happening. So we can think of the technology as the tech AI. And in 1989, Scientific American talked about the special conductive properties of quartz when compared to every other compound like carbon or neon. And of course, you and I know the rest of the story because we're utilizing silicon chip technology to talk to each other right now and to share what we feel are really important messages with the world. But at the time, this idea of silicon chip technology and an entire field of atoms responding simultaneously to electrical impulse was pretty spectacular and far out. And so one of the things that I like to think about with regards to AI, and so if you do a query with a tech AI, it will return so many responses, and then you'll get a little timestamp in terms of like, you know, several 100,000 responses in 32 seconds. And what the AI is showing us is that it has no resistance to the ability to connect with information that exists. So as a channel and a seer, Zipporah, one of the ways that I connect with information is that all information that we've ever thought of or done or created exists in a grid. And so in many ways, it's like sending a feeler out and touching into files and connecting with that file. And in the same way, we have grids through our DNA with our lineage. Okay, we have grids through our collective as a collective. We have grids through common milk sources around a particular dairy because of that dairy. And these are not grids that we utilize. And so in many ways, the World Wide Web and other nets are showing us the capacity to be connected in a quantum and deliberate way that can be in our service in so many ways, right? So if we think about our bodies as being all nature realm, I've consider myself a soul rider and a body deva. And for many years, I kept my body in a compression chamber because I was told that embodiment was like, no way. And, you know, like, why would you want, you know, and the whole narrative about being a woman and everyone coming in through their lenses, you know. And so when I finally realized that she's her own thing that like knows way more than I do about being here, like the ability to connect to trace minerals through the soil as a energetic, you know, nutrition as well. I mean, so like I'm beginning to go like, you know, these breatharians, like, do we really even need to eat? Or is this just like a whole thing we do because it's such a sensory delight in all its exquisiteness? And don't get me wrong, I love to cook. You know, I'm beginning to go like to what extent can this be? So our body, and as a person who's been tracking the energy for, 50, almost 55 years, the ability to hold, like years ago, I would say, I don't know, decades ago, like you had to push to pull, you know, it was opposite. It was so weird here. You know, it's just like, what is this place? And now you can hold a seat. Like I've literally said things and been at a friend's who had a television set on, and like within a few moments on some show from a different era, like almost verbatim the same thing was said. I mean, it's just,
Mhm.
there's an oddness to the quickening of the earth. And
Yeah.
so in certain channels of information, you can see people describe this as the spaceship Earth is firing up, you know, and certainly there's been a lot of really interesting things happening on the Earth with the people and with the Earth itself. Though the ability to manifest or hold tone and have that call and response is
Mhm.
accelerated right now. Okay,
Yes.
so what I feel the AI is showing us that if we release resistance, because we are biomagnetic, we are piezoelectric crystals
Mhm.
living, we're like crystalline plants essentially with a soul rider, and you can describe it however you want to. You know, I'm not here to change anybody's mind, you know.
Oh, no, I got you. I'm following.
Yeah, well, I totally know you are. You know, and I imagine that anyone that's watching this might also be there. The thing is, like, you know, you can, like, even if you're not checking your spirit mail, like, you have a spirit mailbox, you know, because like we're a
Mhm.
collective, and there's a lot of similarity that a lot those grids are identical, you know, and we all have our own source line and we're our own earth line, and if we don't use those lines, nobody's key coded to them. We don't have
Right.
to, but it would be like trying to put two batteries into the same contact points in the same remote. Like, you know, you put one battery in one top and bottom and one battery, you know, like, though for many of us, we in our family of origin training think it's wrong or not okay to be the only person connected above and connected below.
Mhm.
So a lot of the invitation right now that I feel that we're seeing with the technological AI mirror is an invitation to clear resistance within our energetic stance. And what that means is, like, there's no such thing as lying or hiding or veiling. Like, there's no compartments to stuff anything anymore. And so, you know, people are like, why is all this stuff coming up? And it's because
Mhm.
it takes energy to hold things in our energetic field. It takes energy to hold things in
Yep.
our ancestral lines. And if it ain't nailed down, it's not staying right now. And so it's like, you know, you can go with that, or you can resist that, and it's a free will and choice planet. So people are invited to do whatever they'd like. But if you're like, I'd like some things to really shift, like there's a nice wind coming through right now, and you can just open
Yeah.
up the doors and get down on it in a way that I've
Yeah.
never seen before.
Yes. It's really exciting times. I say that all the time. I'm like, anybody that's on the planet right now, conscious and aware of anything, this is a magnificent time to be alive right now on the
Yeah.
planet, like having this experience. And I love it. I love the way you describe that. I love the way that you describe the connection between AI as well as the grid lines that we're all connected to, the collective grid lines that we're connected to, the grid lines of the earth that we're connected to, even solar systems that we're all connected to, and how you talked about the as above, so below, being interconnected with all there is, that
Mhm.
crystalline body, and us awakening to that. That's such a beautiful experience. Like you said, coming from being at a certain age and knowing that there's something different, but the outside experience is not matching that. Like,
Right?
the people are acting like you're like, on the outside looking in, or vice versa. Like, why isn't everybody else feeling the same? But
Right.
the crazy thing about it is, I remember being like 7 years old, and I remember saying to myself, I can't wait until it was almost describing this, like, I can't wait
Yeah.
till everybody in the world sees, like, who I am and like who we are. And it was crazy. I think back, I'm like
Yeah.
7 years old, but now
I
I'm like
knew.
rejoicing and yes, we're here. Like, yes, all of that struggle to make it through, to get on the other side, to be like, okay, now we're tapped in and people are starting to become more aware and awakening in many different ways. And even my own experience is much deeper. It's kind of like, I knew that,
Mhm.
like I knew that, and so I'm enjoying hearing the different ways of expressing it. And, I love that you're bringing in the quantum aspect of it, because that's kind of where my spirit is kind of like, okay, now you're going to get access to certain other codes that, you probably knew
Yeah,
already, but now you're going to
yeah,
start to get the articulation because now's a good time for it,
right.
whereas before things were just I was
Not a
I was
match.
going through survival, like
Yeah,
I was like
yeah,
surviving a lot of stuff and healing a lot of things too
right.
and correcting some things and doing that hard part of the journey. And
Yeah,
so now it's like, wow, like to be alive, this is amazing. And experiencing life and being the interconnectedness of it all um, more frequently.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm really excited. And then kind of how things have gone back full circle for me. Like I started offering guided meditation and, of course, doing my own meditation in the process.
Mhm.
And that's just really helping me with that whole interconnectedness and the riding through the cosmos again. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, so it's so amazing, and I love that you talked about that. So yep, we kind of talked about the Earth bio. So let's talk about your psychic abilities, which I guess you were waiting for a download just a minute ago. So talk to me about that. So I'm sure that started early too.
Well, yeah, it did. I for some reason, everything works out. If you trust that it's always working out for you, it absolutely is. And so, to your comment about things coming at the perfect timing, um, when you surrender to the quantum alignment with all that is, alignment's the only thing that unlocks the doors. They literally don't appear to you unless you um, attend to yourself by turning your eyes inward and sitting in the silence with whatever that means for everyone
Mhm.
else. Because this isn't about here's a 105-point system that you need to memorize to know what.
Right.
It's like no, those days are over. Though the silence, because we are in a new ecology, is the only way to key in. So in many ways it manifested as the Joker for a lot of years because again nobody was like, hey Tobie, but it's like, how do you know these things are, well, people make a lot of allowances for young people, and
Sure.
as you get older it became easier to mask as a nerdy sciencey type with a high capacity for chemistry, subatomic particle physics especially, um, and then eventually it was like, well, wait a minute, this particular type of pattern recognition that I experience is unique to me, is a part of my zone of genius. Again, this, as I in many ways, Zipporah, I didn't really see myself as separate from the world around me. That was a big part of the invitation of my formative years. And coming to a place where I am, yeah, I am you, you are me, but this is my body, okay? And the edges are here. And um, being able to hear people breathe across the street and being able, and so when you lead with that, people are like, are you looking at me? And I'm like, I'm not, I'm really not. It's like, I love you, but I want to be able to walk around the world in a way that is in celebration and not necessarily feeling like a gazillion radio stations on simultaneously. And so a
Sure.
lot of that is discipleship to my path and a very strategic set of daily practices that allow me to anchor in like a mountain. And so I'm not blown out by the current that's flowing all around me all the time. Um, Allowing it to be, and into when you're younger, you like, certain ways of being in the world seem really cooler and perhaps more sexy. And so you're like, oh, like with the big hair, I really want my gifts to look like that. And when I finally stopped, well, a couple things. I got embodied, and I was largely disassociated from my body through my late teens and 20s, early 20s. And so embodiment was a huge part of it. And then also um, a particular pathway that allowed me to, because it's not a matter of, I don't want to say, like, the information is a part of a current that flows. And so it was more creating the appropriate internal structures that would allow me to support a huge amount of current flow through my body in a way that felt comfortable to me, and also um, could be organized within a local life of being a mom and needing to move around in
Yes.
space with the body. And so shortly into my client practice, I trained with a modality that's called crystalline consciousness technique, and it's a tool that is specifically oriented to the practice of lifting up and off of the central nervous system
Mm.
and working with the crystalline energy system of the body and the crystalline energy system of the earth, because those are infinite and infinitely repeating systems that have capacity for enormous, like multiple tsunami size waves of current. And our central nervous system, as we all know right now, because we're enormously full after our own experience and our collective experience within at least the last 5 years, and for many people it could be, decades, depending upon what people's stories and pathways are incredibly full within the nervous system. And so it's a bit like, utilizing a sponge that's full of water. It just leaks wherever it goes. And I think people choose not to be in their bodies because it's uncomfortable to be in their bodies, and may choose not to connect in ways that they're used to, because we don't necessarily live in a society that emphasizes still point, places a
Yeah.
pause. In many ways, we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater in our a-religiosity, because we never really considered what uh, the religion was doing in terms of providing a spine or central organizing system within a household. And so, with it, my 2 cents is, with the increasing proliferation of media, a lot of people are allowing media to set the tone, and it's
True.
not meant to be a coherent spine. It's more like a swirling maelstrom of signs and signifiers and sounds. And you have to really want to be oriented in media dense environments.
Yeah, I love it. And, that probably was a common sense question, but yeah, I definitely want to talk about it. When you're tapped in, when you're connected to all there is, then all it does is activate those extrasensory types of gifts that we all have. So, last question. This has been amazing. How do
Thank you.
you, as a sovereign embodied being, how do you navigate through multi-dimensional spaces? Like, how do you find
Oh,
that is for you?
yeah. Well, it's similar to the last one, Zipporah. So in my psychic gifts, I don't necessarily I look at alignments. So what I see is geometry, essentially, and so I can see where geometry is geometrically expressed, which is pretty straightforward, or distorted. So for example, a rhombus is a special case of a square. It would be like a
Mhm.
square that you just kind of like lean down and push to its side, and so the angles aren't 90 degrees, as one example. But then there's some things that don't make regular shapes at all. And so when I'm working with clients, um, I'm using sacred geometry, and I hold tone for people to do their own alignments, essentially. So I'm not moving anybody's energy. I'm not putting um, information in, and I'm not necessarily taking any information out. I'm just holding a very, not to say just, because it takes practice, but I'm holding a really, really rigorous high vibrational frequency container that allows people to move into the void beyond their ego structures. I'm a bit of a Sherpa walking between my clients and the void as they allow themselves to reconstellate their perceptions of who they are. And so this idea of like, I don't protect myself in a way a lot of people think about protection, because if I
Mhm.
imagine something that exists, it does. And so for me, it's about being in integrity, which is about being in alignment along my spine. And it's about always leading my clients, whether I'm working in groups or with individuals, home to themselves,
Mhm.
because none of this is about me ever. And while I'm happy to interlocute, and I do ask for an exchange to do so, um, I don't even know what the life is meant to look like. And so, as an early practitioner, I would sort of imagine that, I was born and raised Catholic, that people would be throwing down their crutches and the blind would be, tossing off. And then I realized, I'm like, what an ableist, very quickly I was like, I have no idea what people are doing here. you know and so for me, the greatest liberation I can offer people is an opportunity to see what is clearly, so that they can forgive the past and unlock all places where they're locked in all times other than this time, because then that gives everybody 360 degrees of movement in world building in the most authentic way in each breath, with whatever it emerges for them on their path.
I love that. That it's probably your psychic abilities leading into my next question, which is I was going to ask you, like, tell us about your business and how you help your clients, which you pretty much covered. But like, what are some of the services that you offer um, for your clients in your business?
I offer illumination calls for people where it's akin to learning how to comb your hair in the mirror, by utilizing different sensitivities than you might normally use as you're wanting to maybe bring your dreams or your intuitive gifts online, as a part of your business acumen or as a part of your personal experience. Because a lot of people don't necessarily want to overcorrect in their
Yeah.
experience of um, their emergent gifts, and so it's really easy to do that. And also there's a lot of people who suggest that there's only one way, or that the only way is to emulate what they're doing, where
Hmm.
paths are leading to a very sort of strong-handed template. And I like things to be as soft as they can be, and I'm 100% client directed in that regard. In that, like with my kids, I would never lift them up into a tree, but I would be there spotting for them while they increase their capacity to climb, and were able to go to increasing heights because they knew what it was like to move physically around the tree and to express their physicality through their experience of their vestibular system and their proprioceptive system, and their own strength as it day by day increased, and they could pull themselves up in new places in their own timing.
I love that. I've never heard of that. Like, I've never heard of that, but I've heard of people talk about like teaching people mindfulness and how to drink a cup of tea and but when you talked about experiencing brushing your hair in a way that brings on certain gifts, brings them online, I'm like, wow, like I've never heard of that before. That's so deep. And then of course, in that process, it would be tailored to the individual and the individual's experience because, like you said, you have no idea how they're going to, respond to this or react or what it's going to bring up for them. And so you can just kind of be there in a supportive role. So I love that. So, any other services, any books? Because I know you're a writer too. I met you on Substack, and I know
Yeah,
you're over there. Yeah, so let's talk about that a little.
well, right on. I'm working on a handbook right now, talking about embodiment and sovereignty and the invitation of AI, and also working on a subscription opportunity for people called The Lattice that will be about the discipleship to one's own path and becoming really, really energetically nimble through holding tone in a day at a one day at a time way with other people who are doing the same, so that you have somebody to talk to as you're trying on new ways to be in the world. And increasingly, I'm working more with corporations who are wanting to move beyond capacity building and the language of the corporate speak of increasing soft skills, and provide a really rich opportunity for their employees to let go, to the extent that they're ready to release and let go everything that's happened in the immediate past, and to be able to connect more fully with their teammates and in their capacities, or decide that they need to transition to a new work environment in a way that feels mutually amenable to everybody. Because I think people are just ready to be real, quote unquote, in a brand new
Yeah.
way, and we don't necessarily have the language for that. And so, in many ways, Zipporah, a lot of my work is helping people make the invisible visible in a way that feels self-paced and in accessible language, and in practical, flexible tools that are accessible on hand without needing to go anywhere in particular or be there for a long period of time, because a lot of my work is about being integrated and beginning exactly where you are, exactly at the right time, because you're beginning in this breath.
I love it. Thank you so much,
Thank
Tobie.
you
It's
so
been
much,
an
Julia.
absolute pleasure to have you on. I knew it was going to be exciting, and I know I know my listeners are going to love this. I had no
Mhm.
idea what a treat I was in for. So tell us how we can find you on social media. I've got this tab up here, but for the audio version, tell us how we can find you on
Oh,
Instagram and
I'd be
Facebook.
happy to. Thank you. You can find me at Tobie Saad, TobieSaad on Instagram. Facebook, it's at Energy Worker. Um, I'm also on Substack as Constellations of a Wandering Goddess. For whatever reason, I'm blanking on what the handle is for that particular. It might be also at Energy Worker. And you can find me on Stan Store
Yes.
and read a little bit more about what I do. I adore the opportunity to meet new people, and so I offer a free 20-minute exploratory call. And so if you'd love to connect, I would adore meeting you and finding out where you've walked and seeing if we're a rhyme.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes. And of course, I will have all this information down in the description so that you can follow her in the respective places. And yes, it's at Energy Worker on Substack as well. I don't know how you got that handle and that wasn't taken, but
I thought the same thing. I was like, must be meant to be.
yeah. And you got two of them to match. I'm like, wow. Like, who knew, Well, that's awesome. But thank you so much again for
Thank you,
sharing your
Zipporah.
wisdom,
Oh
your
my gosh,
knowledge. Yes,
pleasure
it
to
was
meet you.
totally a joy. Yep, you too. And I'm sure I'll see you around.
I
Okay.
look forward to that.
Hey,
I look forward to that. Thank
yeah.
you for this opportunity, and I'll talk to you really soon.
No problem.
Bye now.